There are many ways to experience the beauty of flight, but only gliding combines the very best of technology, nature, human willpower, and beauty.
I was just caught by flying. I think real flying is gliding without a motor. That's real flying. You have to keep yourself in the air, and the attraction for me is this tension. I think the attraction of gliding is different for everyone, but you are in the air, you are free.
It's 8:30 in the morning in Keheuvel, East Belgium. The weekend's activities start early, and in characteristic style, the whole club joining in the job of hauling out the gliders and preparing them for flight. As teamwork is so essential for a gliding operation, there's a rare camaraderie here, not found on regular airfields. Gliding is a sport, done for no other reason than pure pleasure. At its heart is the Gliding Club, a relaxed place made up of people from all walks of life bound by one passion, that of unpowered flight. Members are always keen to encourage newcomers and share their knowledge and experience. But before flying can commence, we're going to have to find out about the weather.
De briefing voor vandaag. De meteo. Het zal blauwe thermiek zijn, blauw heel de dag. De wind zuid- tot zuidoostenwind 5 knopen. Er komt wel toenemende hoge bewolking, die je nu al ziet, vanuit het westen.
Not the conditions you'd choose to attempt a record-breaking cross-country flight, but perfect for instruction, the main activity on the field today. The cheapest and most exciting way to get into the air is on the end of a winch. A cable is secured to a hook under the glider and always double-checked to make sure that it holds. Should it slip off during the ascent, it could prove disastrous. Once secure, the winch operator, situated more than a kilometre down the airfield, is alerted that a glider is ready. Rolling. Free. The glider begins its steep ascent. Checking airspeed and height, the winch operator maintains full power.
meter, nog altijd 90.
600 feet and still 50 knots.
400 meter.
At 1,300 feet, the glider appears to be almost vertically above. Time to release. For the glider pilot, it's now the challenge begins. The launch is the easy part. Some lift must be found quickly, or the flight will be over in minutes. What they're looking for are thermals, bubbles of warm air which float skyward at rates of up to 8 knots. Harnessing this abundant source of free and invisible energy is what it's all about.
I think that's the nicest thrill of gliding. Every time you catch that thermal and your glider goes up, because the point is you are going down, 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 and you know you're going down. And then suddenly your variometer tells you you are in lifting air. You feel fantastic, you go up. And then you have to find the center of the thermal. You can go up maybe to 1,000 meters, maybe higher. And that's giving, I think, the best thrill of gliding. This finding this lifting air.
One of the secrets behind the phenomenal increase in glider performance over the past decades has been the rapid adoption of composite materials by all the major manufacturers. Glass is the main material used in the construction of gliders nowadays. Glass fibre provides the smooth skin of the aircraft. The structural integrity comes from something tougher. Glaser Dirks, one of the leading high-performance manufacturers, are now the first to make the fuselage and cockpit section entirely from carbon fibre aramid fibre sandwich. These materials are not only strong, but very light, and can be moulded into the slippery shapes demanded by the aerodynamicists. Composites have for long been regarded as exotic and unsuitable for general aviation airframes. The fact that they're now increasingly being used is largely the result of their success, coping with the stresses and strains demanded of high-performance gliders. Aerobatics in a glider is something special, dynamic and harmonious, quite different from the often jerky, brutal movements performed by powered aircraft. This Glaser Dirks twin-seater effortlessly handles forces up to +7 and -5 G, performing tail slides and rolling turns, even flying inverted without the sink rate increasing much. In a dive, it'll reach speeds of up to 270 kilometres or 168 miles an hour. Saint-Aubin in the French Provence holds a special attraction for glider pilots. Here is located one of Europe's top mountain gliding schools. The area boasts not only the craggy splendour of high alpine scenery, but also superb weather conditions. Not only good thermals, but if you're lucky and a mistral blows, mountain wave that can take a glider soaring to over 9,000 metres or 30,000 feet. People come here from all over the world to learn the specialities involved in mountain flying. With no mountain wave present today, the aircraft are being prepared for an afternoon jousting with the thermals, some of which can pump air up at over 20 knots, hammering the glider pilot against the canopy. Once readied, the gliders lie waiting silently for the conditions to develop, while in true French style, the pilots disappear for a good lunch to prepare for the challenges ahead. Gliding is very labour-intensive. People are needed to look out for incoming gliders, clear them from the landing area, launch them again, keep flying logs, and do many other essential jobs around the airfield, all of which generally becomes a family affair. This voluntary help avoids the cost of staff and is the main factor which keeps club gliding relatively cheap. Although gliding has developed an image of being a rich man's pastime, it isn't so at club level. These relatively crude wood and canvas trainers provide a cheap and easy introduction to the sport, and for many people, the chance to start up a full-blown aviation career. Once a nominal annual fee is paid, members fly for around $2 a winch start. Instruction thrown in, generally for free. The catch comes if you're in a hurry. Training involves hours of waiting before each flight. You're expected to contribute your time to help others fly while you wait your turn. It's now noon in Saint-Aubin, and the thermals are working. All of a sudden, everyone is eager to get airborne. Here, gliders are launched by aerotow, which allows them to release higher, and where possible, in an active thermal. Only high-performance machines fly here. This magnificent Schleicher ASH-25 sports wings spanning 82 feet or 25 meters, which give it a glide ratio of around 60:1. This means that from an altitude of just over 1,000 meters in still air, the ship would fly on for 60 kilometers before being forced to land. But all this high performance comes at a price, something in the region of $140,000. It's easy to see why that is when you look into what's involved in producing the latest machines. Apart from the research and development programs that need supporting, just building the aircraft is an expensive business. The cost of raw materials add up to only 25% of the total cost. The rest is made up of labor. Each machine is virtually hand-built, with more than 1,000 man-hours going into producing the DG600 being built here. Gliders do now appear to be near the end of the road as far as technical developments go. In order to get an improvement of 1% in performance these days, the costs would increase by more than 40%. And as far as instrumentation goes, today's top ships are fitted out with everything going, including sophisticated flight computers and satellite navigation. All the information is displayed on a head-up display, so that you don't have to take your eyes off the horizon or other craft. After 30 years of lying rotting in a barn, this 1930s design was again made flyable after more than 2,000 hours of restoration. Around 100 of these aircraft were built in Holland by Fokker in 1945 in a bid to re-stimulate private flying in those depressed years. They based their plans on a glider designed in the 1930s by the German manufacturer Schleicher, now famous for its 25-meter state-of-the-art carbon fiber ships. Originally hand-launched by teams of enthusiastic ground crew off sand dunes, these early gliders did a lot to introduce ordinary people to flying in the 1930s and 40s. They were sturdy, cheap to build, and relatively easy to fly. The only catch being, as they were single-seaters, you had, right from the start, to fly the thing yourself. All the instructor could do was give you a thorough brief. After that, you were on your own. With no restrictions at all on visibility, it's certainly one way to enjoy the view. But flights must always have been short. Releasing here at 400 meters or 1,200 feet, the craft drops like a stone. The controls are light and responsive and the aircraft well balanced, but there's only barely enough time to bring her round to land. On the performance side, there's certainly been enormous progress over the past 60 years. Surprisingly, increased performance doesn't necessarily mean lighter machines. To get the best out of a high-performance glider these days means adding weight in the form of water ballast. About 125 litres of water are pumped into the wings. It has the effect of dramatically increasing the glider's speed through the air, for the same reason that a stone falls faster than a feather when dropped. Essential if you're looking to cover any distance.
Some people, like me, like to glide on distances. Most people don't even know that you can glide many kilometers, hundreds, even up to 1,000 kilometers, just by hot air. And that's just a kick.
A vital piece of equipment for the distance flyer is the barograph, sealed before each flight. It gives a record of height flown and proves that the glider has been airborne for the whole flight. Competitions are a vital part of the sport of gliding. Here at the annual Mountain Flying Championships at Vinon in southern France, more than 60 gliders have come together for a week of good-natured rivalry. Each aircraft carries a barograph and a camera to record the flight, and the object is simply to get around the course in the fastest possible time. The tasks vary according to the weather. Today, the larger machines are being set a 500-kilometer triangle. The winner will complete that in under 3 hours. Because no headway is made during the time spent gaining height, circling in thermals, the pilot needs to push his craft up to speeds of 250 kilometers or 155 miles an hour in order to make up the time. Final preparations involve taking on water ballast and programming flight computers. Satellite navigation systems are perhaps the most significant new piece of instrumentation to be introduced since the variometer. Not only do pilots know for the first time exactly where they are, but flight computers can now give accurate second-by-second information on the craft's performance in the competition and target figures to aim for to maintain a winning flight. Once the thermals begin to pump, the job of hauling the 60 gliders into the air begins. With 2 tugs at work, this can take over 90 minutes. Each glider starts out when they're ready. They're not flying directly against each other, but against the clock. Of course, the first job is to find lift. On a sunny day, cumulus clouds often mark the best thermals. But on days with clear skies, you have to feel for it, watching for circling birds, or look for ground features such as bare rock surfaces, which heat up more than their surroundings. Pilots fly to tones that rise or fall in pitch, in response to climb and sink rates, and to symbols from flight computers that tell them whether they should speed up through sink or slow down in lift. Although a thermaling glider may look serene from the ground, the cockpit is often a turbulent, hectic place, with the pilot working hard to milk the very best from the lift. Mountain flying needs to be approached with particular care. Winds can vary enormously and change direction dramatically with height. And a pilot needs to maintain much more altitude than when flying over flatland because of the difficulties of finding safe landing spots should the thermals give out. In spite of all the most sophisticated instruments, the most experienced pilots will occasionally be caught out by that most unpredictable element, the weather, and have to land short of their goal, often in a farmer's field. Glider pilots are fully trained to cope with this situation. The main things to look out for are power cables, cows, horses, hedges, and crops. But there's only one way to avoid an outside landing, and that's to fly a motor glider.
You have 2 types of motor gliders. The real motor gliders, where the motor is in front, and the real gliders, where the motor is inside the fuselage. Instead of landing in a field, you can fly home with that thing. Some of the machines you can start yourself. They need about 6 times less petrol than when they are towed up by another aircraft, and about 3 times less than they are towed up by a winch.
The self-launching glider is now making a huge impact in the gliding world. Although Glaser Dirks began production as early as 1981, it's only recently that the concept has gained widespread interest, and all the other major manufacturers have followed suit. It's estimated that over 80% of all gliders now produced in Germany are motorized. Once the craft has gained sufficient altitude and is flying in lift, the aircraft returns to being a high-performance sailplane, with no loss in performance whatsoever. The only penalty paid is the extra weight added by the motor, but even that is easily compensated for by taking on less water ballast. The motor can also be deployed in the air, allowing the craft to continue to fly once the thermals are gone. In this situation, the pilot uses the motor in short 3-minute bursts, just to gain sufficient altitude to glide on again. In this fashion, the aircraft covers around 130 kilometers an hour, using hardly 3 liters of fuel. Fantastically efficient in any terms. The first competitors are now approaching the finishing line. Converting all their height into speed, they dive at the line at over 260 kilometres or 160 miles an hour, at the same time shedding water ballast. Although it helps them reach these high speeds in a dive, the extra weight in the wings would be catastrophic when landing. Like the sailor, the glider pilot loves the purity of riding the wind. But there's more to it. Flying a glider means constant decision-making. Judgment is all. Controls require a sensitive touch and aerodynamic sympathy. If you've ever wondered why so many people spend hours sitting up in the sky, the answer is that right from your first solo to a cross-country flight over the Alps, gliding provides a challenge at every stage. No 2 days are ever the same. Every flight brings its unique rewards. The Everett Air Show in Seattle, Washington. It's not surprising that tensions are running high. Final preparations are being made above the din of an F-16 warming up. Manfred Radius, a furniture builder by trade, is during the summer months one of North America's top airshow pilots, flying a spectacular aerobatic routine in his Start and Flug Salto. And in the land of powerbatics, he's up against a lot of competition.
In my case, without engine power, there's very little room for bad judgment, and very little room for error. I have to do it right. The fun is actually the challenge. In order to be able to do an aerobatic routine or even just a maneuver, one has to practice. One has to practice a lot, because it does not happen automatically. The glider wants to do anything but what I wanted to do. Now I have all the energy I need to do my airshow routine. Height is potential energy. And I'm converting this height now into kinetic energy by going into a dive, accelerating. Now I'm losing height, but I'm gaining speed and therefore kinetic energy. There's very little tolerance because I'm moving in air, which moves often. I could be flying at a day where there's convection, which means thermals, rising air currents, descending air currents.
For the ultimate in good energy management, Radius wraps up the show with one of the most remarkable pieces of glider flying seen anywhere.
At the very end of my airshow routine, I'm doing the inverted ribbon cut. We're having two poles between which a ribbon is suspended 25 feet above the ground, so fairly low. And I have to make sure that I'm at that ribbon at this particular point at the right speed, which is somewhere between 100 and 120 miles an hour.
Having left his airfield some 5 hours ago, Bert de Wijs is now on his last leg home, having flown over Holland, Germany, Luxembourg and Belgium in the one flight. For Bert, it's a wonderful way to spend a Sunday. Although the conditions in this part of Europe are never going to produce records, he goes to Spain for that, where he's twice made flights of over 1,000 kilometres.
For me, gliding is a passion, a devotion. My average gliding time is about 6-7 hours, sometimes 8. I have done up to 11 hours in this cockpit, and I don't feel 1 minute or 1 second board or anything, because you are fighting against, you have to fight all the time. When you are doing nothing, you will be suddenly on the ground in 10, 15 minutes, maybe half an hour. It's unbelievable. When I get out of a long flight in the evening, I feel exhausted. This flight was from the Dutch-Belgian border. And from the Dutch-Belgian border, I've been flying around Köln, down to Trier, which is besides of Luxembourg, and then back to Belgium-Dutch border, which is 632 kilometers. Flight like this is possible once, twice, maybe 3 times a year. It's not so often in these countries that you can do it.
1-4, stay on the left side.
Landau, Germany. The finish of the European Club Class Championships. Because they're relatively cheap, they're one of the most active classes in international glider competition. 30 years ago, they'd have been flying a 50-kilometer task. Today, they're completing one of 500. Although the top performance machines have virtually reached the theoretical limits imposed by aerodynamics, there's still room for the simpler craft to improve. Recognizing that the future of gliding rests with clubs and the ordinary pilot, an international competition is currently underway to design a new world-class glider that will offer all the best of the new technology in a low-cost package. This new glider might also fulfill another ambition of glider pilots, to have their sport accredited to the Olympic Games.